Sarah Chen stood at the boarding gate of the Celestial Traverse and looked up at the massive ship. It was the most expensive passenger vessel in the galaxy, built for diplomats and wealthy merchants. Today, she was one of those diplomats, even if nobody seemed to think she belonged there. The ship's entrance was huge, designed for the tall alien species that filled most of the galaxy. Sarah was only 5 feet and 3 inches tall. Around her, other passengers towered above her head. The Kralax warriors stood nearly 9 feet tall, with thick gray skin and muscles that looked like they could bend steel. The Vex Thari were made of living crystal that caught the light and sparkled as they moved. The Sithral merchants slithered past on their long serpent bodies, their scales shimmering in shades of green and gold. Sarah adjusted her uniform and walked forward. She was Earth's representative to the Galactic Council Summit. It was supposed to be an honor. But as she approached the security checkpoint, she heard the whispers and saw the smiles that weren't friendly. "Look, they sent a human," one Kralax guard said to another. His voice was deep and loud, and he didn't bother to speak quietly. "I thought humans were supposed to be extinct by now." "No. They just got into the council last year," the other guard replied. "Charity case, I heard. The council felt sorry for them." Sarah kept her face neutral. She had heard worse during her years in the Earth military. She stepped up to the scanner and placed her hand on the screen. The machine hummed as it read her biometrics. For a moment, the screen flickered. Numbers and symbols flashed across it too fast to read. Then it went back to normal and beeped to let her through. "Welcome aboard, Lieutenant Chen," the ship's AI said in a pleasant voice. "Please proceed to Deck 7, Room 412. "Thank you, Ether," Sarah said. That was the AI's name. She picked up her small bag and walked into the ship. The inside of the Celestial Traverse was even more impressive than the outside. The walls were made of polished metal that reflected soft blue light. Plants from a dozen different worlds grew in carefully maintained gardens. The air smelled clean and slightly sweet. Sarah found her room quickly. It was small compared to the other cabins she had passed, but it was comfortable enough. She unpacked her few belongings and changed into her formal diplomatic uniform. The summit would begin in 3 days, after the ship reached Station Zenith 7. Until then, she would have to endure social events with the other passengers. That evening, there was a mandatory welcome dinner in the main ballroom. Sarah arrived exactly on time and immediately understood where she stood in the social order. The room had been arranged with multiple tables, each marked with metal plaques. The largest table at the front was labeled Primary Species Representatives. That table was already full of the tall, powerful aliens who ran most of the galaxy. Sarah's table was near the back, close to the kitchen doors. The plaque read, Minor Species Representatives. She sat down next to a small, furry creature that looked like a cross between a rabbit and a fox. The creature had huge eyes and soft purple fur. "Hello," Sarah said with a smile. "I'm Sarah." "I'm Pip," the creature said in a high, squeaky voice. "You're a human, right?" "I've never met a human before." "That's right," Sarah said. "Nice to meet you, Pip." They talked quietly while servers brought out the first course. Sarah noticed that the servers seemed confused about what to bring her. Most species in the galaxy ate very different foods. Eventually, they brought her something that looked close enough to vegetables and protein. It tasted strange, but she ate it without complaint. From the front table, a loud voice cut through the dinner conversation. Captain Vorthak, the ship's captain and a Kralax warrior, stood up with a glass in his massive hand. "Welcome, everyone, to the Celestial Traverse," he boomed. "We have representatives from 70 different species aboard today. Some of the greatest civilizations in the galaxy are represented here." He paused, and his eyes swept over the room. When he looked at Sarah's table, his smile turned into something else. and some of the smallest. Laughter rippled through the room. Sarah felt Pip shrink down in his seat beside her. Another alien stood up. This was Ambassador Zixlar, one of the Vex Thari. His crystalline body reflected the light like a prism. "Captain Vorthak is correct," he said. His voice sounded like wind chimes. "The Galactic Council has been very generous in recent years, accepting species that would not have qualified in the past. Species that rank in the bottom 30% for strength, speed, intelligence, and lifespan." Sarah knew he was talking about humans. She also knew he was technically correct. Humans were not the strongest or the fastest. They didn't live as long as many other species, and their technology was still catching up to galactic standards. But she also knew there were things the database didn't measure. She kept eating her dinner and said nothing. "I heard humans can barely survive outside their home planet," a Sithral merchant hissed from another table. "They need special air and special temperature and special everything." "Fragile creatures," Vorthak agreed. He looked directly at Sarah. "Tell me, human, why did your species even apply to join the council? What could you possibly offer us?" Every eye in the room turned to Sarah. She put down her fork carefully and stood up. The room got quiet. "We applied because we believe in cooperation," Sarah said. Her voice was calm and steady. "We believe that all species have something to contribute no matter how small they are, and we believe that strength comes in many forms." "Well said," Zixlar said, but his tone suggested he didn't mean it. "Very diplomatic. But the reality is that your species has little to offer in terms of military might, economic power, or scientific advancement. You are here because the Council takes pity on primitive species." Sarah sat back down. She felt Pip's small paw touch her arm in sympathy. "Don't listen to them," Pip whispered. "I think humans are interesting." "Thank you, Pip," Sarah whispered back. The dinner continued, but Sarah noticed something. While everyone was laughing and making jokes about humans, she was watching them. Old habits from her military days. She noticed the security guards were positioned poorly. She noticed the doors weren't properly monitored. She noticed that the ship's crew seemed overconfident and relaxed. These were the kinds of things that got people killed in combat. Sarah had learned that the hard way during the colony wars on Kepler 442b. She had been a military medic back then, treating wounded soldiers while under fire. She had seen what happened when people got too comfortable and stopped paying attention, but she kept these observations to herself. Let them think humans were weak and stupid. Let them laugh. Sarah had learned a long time ago that underestimating your enemy was the first step toward losing. As the dinner ended and passengers began to leave, Sarah helped Pip down from his tall chair. The little alien smiled up at her. "Will you be my friend during the trip?" Pip asked. Sarah smiled back. "Of course." She walked Pip back to his cabin, then returned to her own room. Once inside, she locked the door and pulled out a small data pad. She made notes about the ship's layout, the security weaknesses she had noticed, and the general attitude of the crew and passengers. She didn't know why she was doing this. Just instinct, maybe. Or maybe something deeper, something that all humans carried in their genes. The need to be prepared, the need to survive. Outside her window, the stars streaked by as the ship moved through space. Sarah looked at them and thought about Earth, so far away now. She thought about all the humans who had fought and died to get their species to this point. Humans who had survived ice ages and plagues and wars and disasters that should have wiped them out. They were still here, still fighting, still moving forward. Sarah smiled to herself and went to sleep. The next morning, Sarah woke up early. Her internal clock was still set to Earth time, which meant she was up before most of the other passengers. She used the time to explore the ship, memorizing the layout of each deck. She told herself it was just curiosity, but deep down she knew better. She was doing what humans always did, preparing for the worst. The Celestial Traverse had 12 decks. The top decks were for luxury suites and observation lounges. The middle decks held the dining areas, entertainment centers, and passenger cabins. The lower decks contained the engines, cargo bay, and maintenance tunnels. Sarah made mental notes of all the emergency exits, the locations of escape pods, and the spots where the ship's structure looked weakest. She ran into Pip in one of the observation lounges. The little alien was pressed against the window, watching the stars go by. "Good morning, Sarah," Pip said cheerfully. "Isn't space beautiful?" "It is," Sarah agreed. She sat down next to him. "Are you traveling alone, Pip?" "No. My parents are here. They're traders, but they're always busy with business meetings." Pip's ears drooped slightly. "They don't have much time for me." Sarah felt a familiar ache in her chest. Before she had become a diplomat, before she had been a soldier, she had been a sister. She knew what it felt like to want attention from busy adults. "Well, I have time. Would you like to have breakfast with me?" Pip's eyes lit up. "Really? Yes." They went to the dining hall together. Sarah noticed that several passengers stared at them as they walked past. A human and a small alien, two of the least important species on the ship. She ignored the stares. Over breakfast, Pip asked her endless questions about Earth. What did humans eat? What did their cities look like? Did they have families like other species? Sarah answered each question patiently, happy to share about her home world. "My grandmother told me that humans are dangerous," Pip said suddenly, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Is that true?" Sarah paused with her fork halfway to her mouth. "Why would she say that?" "She said humans survived things that killed other species. She said humans don't know when to give up." Pip looked worried. "But you're nice. You're not dangerous." Sarah smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Sometimes the most dangerous things look harmless, Pip." Before Pip could ask what she meant, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "Attention all passengers," Captain Vorthak's voice boomed. "We have received a distress signal from mining station Kappa 7. We will be making an unscheduled stop to provide assistance. Please remain calm and stay in your cabins while our security team handles the situation." Sarah's instincts immediately went on alert. Something felt wrong. She stood up quickly. "Come on, Pip. I'll take you back to your parents." "But I want to stay with you," Pip protested. "Not this time," Sarah said firmly. She grabbed his paw and led him through the corridors. Her mind was already racing. A distress call from a mining station, an unscheduled stop, a security team that she had already identified as poorly trained and overconfident. This was a trap. She knew it in her bones. She found Pip's parents in their cabin and practically pushed the little alien inside. "Keep him here and lock your door," she told them. "Don't open it for anyone except the captain or me." Pip's father, a larger version of Pip with gray fur instead of purple, looked offended. "How dare you give us orders, human? Just do it," Sarah said. Her voice had changed. It wasn't the polite, diplomatic voice anymore. It was the voice she had used in combat, giving orders that meant the difference between life and death. "Please." Something in her tone made Pip's father nod slowly. He pulled Pip inside and closed the door. Sarah heard the lock click. She ran toward the bridge, but security guards stopped her in the corridor. "Passengers must return to their cabins," one guard said. He was Kralax, huge and intimidating. "I need to speak to the captain," Sarah said. "I think this is a trap." The guard laughed. "A trap? You think some mining station pirates can threaten this ship? We have the best security in the galaxy." "I've seen better security fail," Sarah said. "Please, just let me talk to—" "Return to your cabin, human," the guard interrupted, "before I escort you there myself." Sarah looked into his eyes and saw nothing but contempt. He wasn't going to listen. None of them would listen. She was just a human after all. What could she possibly know about security? She turned and walked back toward her cabin. But she didn't go inside. Instead, she ducked into a maintenance corridor and made her way to a spot where she could see the main docking bay through a window. The Celestial Traverse was approaching a small station that looked old and damaged. Sarah watched as the ship's docking clamps extended and connected to the station's airlock. Captain Vorthak and his security team, all Kralak's warriors, marched toward the airlock in formation. They were carrying weapons, but they looked relaxed, confident. Sarah counted 12 security guards. Against what? An unknown number of pirates? This was already a mistake. The airlock opened. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then all hell broke loose. Explosions ripped through the docking bay. Pirates poured out of the airlock, wearing armor and carrying heavy weapons. They moved fast and coordinated, like a trained military unit. These weren't ordinary criminals. They were professionals. The Kralak security team tried to fight back, but they were caught completely off guard. Within minutes, half of them were down. The others retreated, but more pirates were already flooding into the ship from different access points. Sarah's heart pounded, but her hands were steady. She had seen combat before. She knew what came next. The ship's alarm began to blare. "Intruder alert! All passengers report to the main ballroom. This is not a drill." Sarah moved quickly and quietly through the maintenance corridors. She had mapped these tunnels earlier this morning. Now she understood why her instincts had told her to do that. Humans were good at preparing for disasters. It was how they had survived for millions of years. She reached the ballroom through a service entrance. Other passengers were already being herded inside by the pirates. Everyone looked terrified. The Vexthari, the Cithral, the Kralaks. All the species that had mocked humans for being weak were now helpless. Sarah slipped into the crowd, trying to stay unnoticed. She positioned herself near the back wall where she could see everything. The pirate leader entered the ballroom. He was enormous, even by Kralak standards. His armor was black and scarred from many battles. His eyes were cold and calculating. "Good morning, passengers," he said, his voice echoing through the room. "My name is Kragzul. You are now my prisoners. If you cooperate, you will live. If you resist, you will die. It's very simple." Ambassador Zixlar stepped forward, his crystalline body shaking. "This is an outrage! We are diplomats traveling to the Galactic Council Summit. You cannot—" Kragzul moved faster than Sarah expected. His fist struck Zixlar, and the crystal alien shattered into 100 pieces that scattered across the floor. The room went silent except for the sound of crystal shards tinkling as they bounced and rolled. "Anyone else want to tell me what I cannot do?" Kragzul asked. No one spoke. Sarah felt cold rage building inside her. She had seen this before, bullies who used fear and violence to control others. She had fought against them on Kepler 442b. She had lost friends to people like Kragzul, but she stayed still and quiet. Not yet. Timing was everything. Kragzul's tech specialist, a smaller alien with 4 arms, pulled out a datapad and connected it to one of the ship's access panels. "Scanning passenger manifest now, boss. Let's see who's worth the most ransom money." The tech specialist's screen began displaying information about each species. Price values appeared next to each name. Sarah saw her own name scroll by. The value next to it was embarrassingly low. Humans were worth almost nothing in the galactic economy. "Pathetic," Kragzul muttered, looking at the numbers. "Half of these species aren't worth the trouble of—" His words stopped suddenly. The datapad in the tech specialist's hands began flashing red. An alarm started beeping loudly. "What's wrong?" Kragzul demanded. The tech specialist's face had gone pale. All 4 of his hands were shaking. "Boss, the system is giving me a warning, a hazard warning." "About what?" The tech specialist looked up at the crowd of prisoners. His eyes scanned the room until they found Sarah. He pointed at her with one trembling hand. "About her." Every eye in the ballroom turned to Sarah. She stood perfectly still against the back wall, her face showing nothing. Inside, her mind was racing, but outside, she looked calm. Cragzul stared at her, confusion crossing his scarred face. Her? The little human? What kind of warning? The tech specialist's 4 hands were typing frantically on the datapad, but the alarm kept getting louder. Red lights flashed across the screen. The ship's AI is going crazy, boss. It's locked me out of the system. All I can see is this warning message playing over and over. Show me, Cragzul growled. The tech specialist held up the datapad. The screen displayed a simple message in bright red letters. Warning, hazard level 9. Species detected, extreme caution, required species. Human threat, classification, persistence, predator. Cragzul read the message twice. Then he laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. Hazard level 9? For a human? Your scanner is broken. Humans are barely level 2. Everyone knows they're weak. But the other pirates weren't laughing. Some of them had gone quiet, looking at Sarah with new eyes. One pirate near the door actually took a step back. Boss, the tech specialist said quietly, the hazard scale goes from level 1 to level 10. Level 9 means there are only 3 species in the entire galaxy classified that high. The Devourer Horde, the Rage Spores, and they're both extinct or quarantined, Cragzul interrupted. This is a mistake. Fix it. I'm trying, but the AI won't let me access anything else. It's showing me the full classified file on humans now. The tech specialist pressed something on his pad, and a hologram appeared in the center of the room. It was a 3-dimensional display of information, floating in the air where everyone could see it. Sarah recognized the format. It was a Galactic Council database entry. She had never seen her own species file before. It was classified, available only to council members and military commanders. The file began to scroll through information. Species: Homo sapiens, human, origin, Earth, Sector 429. Hazard classification, level 9, primary threat type, persistence, predator. Secondary traits, tool adaptation, pack bonding, environmental adaptation. The hologram showed images of humans throughout history. Ancient humans running after animals for days until the animals collapsed from exhaustion. Humans crossing frozen wastelands and burning deserts. Humans building cities and ships and weapons. More text appeared. Evolutionary background. Apex persistence hunter. Capable of tracking prey for multiple days without rest. Evolved to survive multiple extinction-level events on home planet. Physical capabilities: below average strength, above average endurance, extreme pain tolerance. Capable of functioning with injuries that would incapacitate most species. Captain Vorthak, who was being held at gunpoint with the other crew members, stared at the hologram. This can't be right. Humans are fragile. We've all seen the data. They rank bottom 30% in almost everything. The hologram continued. Psychological profile. Refuses to acknowledge defeat. Will continue fighting long past point of rational surrender. Forms emotional bonds with other species and will defend bonded individuals to the death. Warning: humans possess irrational determination when protecting others. Will sacrifice themselves without hesitation for pack members, including non-human entities. Sarah felt dozens of eyes on her. She could see the shift happening in the room. The other passengers were looking at her differently now, not with mockery or pity, with something that looked like fear. It's still just one small human, Cragzul said, but his voice was less certain now. Even if the classification is real, she's alone and unarmed. What's she going to do? Sarah decided it was time to speak. She had been quiet and diplomatic for days, letting people think she was harmless. But that mask wasn't useful anymore. You should listen to the database, she said. Her voice was different now, colder, harder. It was the voice of someone who had seen real combat and survived. It's trying to warn you. Cragzul turned to face her fully. Warn me? About what? About what happens when you threaten something I've decided to protect, Sarah said. She looked around the room, making eye contact with the other passengers. With Pip's parents, who were clutching each other in fear. With Captain Vorthak, with the Sithral merchants, and the remaining Vexithari. I've been on this ship for 2 days. That's long enough. Long enough for what? Cragzul asked. Long enough to decide these people are my pack now, Sarah said simply. Even the ones who made fun of me. Even the ones who think humans are worthless. They're mine to protect. The hologram was still displaying information. Critical warning. Human pack. Bonding behavior is species-wide phenomenon. Humans will extend protection to any entity they perceive as part of their social group. This includes aliens, artificial intelligences, and even animals. Tactical note. Threatening a human's pack members will result in extreme response. Human will prioritize pack survival over personal survival. Retreat is recommended. Cragzul's confidence was finally cracking. He looked at Sarah more carefully now, and Sarah knew he was starting to see what she had hidden behind her diplomatic smile. The scars on her hands from holding weapons. The way she stood balanced and ready to move. The absolute lack of fear in her eyes. You're a soldier, he said slowly. I was, Sarah confirmed. Military medic. Colony Wars. Kepler 442b. One of the other pirates made a choking sound. Boss, Kepler 442b was where the rebel forces held out for 8 months against a siege. The defenders were outnumbered 10-1. Everyone said they should have surrendered, but they just kept fighting and we won, Sarah finished. Because humans don't know how to quit. The hologram changed again, showing new information. Combat assessment. Humans are not the strongest fighters in direct combat. However, humans excel at asymmetric warfare, improvised weapons, psychological tactics, endurance combat, guerrilla tactics. Additional warning, humans are extremely creative when threatened. They will weaponize anything in their environment. They will turn their own weaknesses into advantages. Cragzul pulled out his weapon and pointed it at Sarah. I don't care what the database says. You're still just one small female against 12 armed pirates. Sit down and shut up, or I'll kill you right now. Sarah looked at the weapon without flinching. You could kill me. You probably would kill me eventually. But here's what would happen first. I would hurt you, badly. And while you were distracted with me, some of the other passengers would get away. Maybe not all of them, but some. Because that's what humans do. We buy time for our pack, even if it costs us everything. She took one step forward. Just one. But something about the way she moved made 2 of the pirates raise their weapons nervously. You know what's funny? Sarah continued. Everyone on this ship has been making jokes about how weak humans are, how fragile, how useless. But you know what none of them understood? Humans didn't get to space by being the strongest, or the fastest, or the smartest. We got here by being too stubborn to die when we should have. The hologram displayed one final message. Recommendation for all species. If hostile encounter with human is unavoidable, eliminate threat immediately. Do not allow human time to prepare. Do not allow human to protect others. Do not assume human will behave rationally. If human has already decided you are enemy, retreat is strongly advised. Cragzul's weapon hand was shaking slightly. You're bluffing. You're just trying to scare us. Sarah smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had already accepted that she might die today. Am I? Here's a test. Let me use the bathroom. I need to go. If I'm really dangerous, you won't let me out of your sight. If I'm harmless like you think, what's the problem? It was a calculated risk. Sarah was betting that Kragzul's pride wouldn't let him admit he was afraid of one small human. She was right. "Fine," Kragzul snarled. "You have 3 minutes. Jex, escort her and keep your weapon on her the whole time." One of the pirates, a thin alien with green skin, grabbed Sarah's arm and pushed her toward the door. Sarah went without resistance. She glanced back once at the ballroom full of frightened passengers and caught Vorthak's eyes. The captain was staring at her like he had never seen her before. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe none of them had seen her, not really. They had seen a small, quiet human and assumed that was all she was. They were about to learn differently. As Sarah walked out of the ballroom with a gun pressed against her back, she was already planning. The bathroom was near a maintenance access hatch. The ship's ventilation system ran behind the walls. The pirates were watching the main corridors, but they weren't watching the spaces between the walls. Because they didn't think like humans. They didn't think like predators who had spent millions of years learning to hunt prey through every environment on Earth. Sarah's smile grew wider. The hunt was about to begin. The pirate named Jex walked 3 steps behind Sarah with his weapon trained on her back. He was nervous. She could tell by the way his breathing changed and how his footsteps weren't quite steady. "In there," he said, pointing to a bathroom door with his gun. "You have 2 minutes." "Thank you," Sarah said politely. She went inside and closed the door. She heard Jex position himself right outside, his weapon probably still aimed at the door. Sarah looked around the bathroom quickly. It was designed for multiple species, which meant it had features for different body types and needs. More importantly, it had a ventilation grate in the ceiling. She had noticed it this morning during her exploration of the ship. She climbed onto the sink and carefully removed the grate. It came off silently. She had learned to move quietly during the colony wars. Humans might not be the strongest, but they could be very, very quiet when they needed to be. Sarah pulled herself up into the ventilation shaft. Her small size, which everyone had mocked, was now an advantage. She fit easily into spaces where the larger aliens couldn't follow. She replaced the grate behind her and started crawling through the shaft as fast as she dared. Behind her, she heard Jex knock on the bathroom door. "Hurry up in there!" Sarah didn't answer. She was already 20 feet away, moving through the ship's ventilation system like a ghost. 30 seconds later, she heard Jex kick the door open. Then his voice, panicked and angry. "Boss, the human is gone. She's in the vents." Sarah smiled in the darkness of the shaft. Now it began. She had memorized the ship's layout. She knew exactly where she was going. The maintenance deck was 2 levels down, accessible through a vertical shaft. She found it and slid down, controlling her descent with her hands and feet pressed against the walls. Her palms burned from the friction, but she ignored the pain. Humans were good at ignoring pain. The maintenance deck was dark and empty. The pirates hadn't bothered to secure it because there was nothing valuable here, just tools, spare parts, and the environmental control systems. Sarah went to work immediately. She had been a medic, but in the colony wars everyone learned basic engineering and combat skills. You had to when you were surrounded by enemies and running out of supplies. She opened the environmental control panel and studied it for 30 seconds. Then she started making adjustments. She lowered the temperature in the cargo bay by 15 degrees and reduced the oxygen content by 3%. Not enough to be immediately dangerous, but enough to make the 4 pirates stationed there uncomfortable and slow. Humans could tolerate lower oxygen levels better than most species. It was another one of those things the database mentioned. Humans had evolved at sea level on Earth, but they could also climb mountains 8,000 meters high where the air was thin. Their bodies adapted. Next, Sarah went to the tool storage and gathered supplies. A welding torch, some magnetic clamps, a coil of cable, a few chemical containers that could be mixed to create smoke or, if necessary, something more dangerous. She worked fast, but carefully. her hands steady despite the adrenaline pumping through her system. This was what humans were built for. Not direct combat where size and strength mattered most, but this, improvising, adapting, finding ways to win when they should lose. Sarah used the ship's internal communication panel to access the intercom system. She connected her makeshift device and pressed play. Throughout the ship, speakers crackled to life. The sound that came out was something Sarah had recorded on her personal device back on Earth. Human war drums. Deep, rhythmic, primal. The kind of sound that ancient human warriors had used to terrify their enemies. In the ballroom, the pirates jumped at the sudden noise. Through the ventilation shaft, Sarah could hear Cragzool shouting, "What is that? Turn it off!" But they couldn't turn it off. Sarah had locked them out of the system. The drums continued, echoing through every corridor of the ship. Sarah moved to her next target, the cargo bay where 4 pirates were stationed. She crawled through the vents until she was directly above them. Through the grate, she could see them huddled together, looking cold and uncomfortable. The reduced oxygen was making them drowsy. One of them was already sitting down, his head nodding. Sarah opened the grate slowly, inch by inch. Then she dropped down behind them, silent as a shadow. She grabbed a heavy piece of equipment from a nearby shelf and swung it hard at the first pirate's head. He went down without making a sound. The others spun around, but Sarah was already moving. She threw a chemical canister that exploded into thick smoke. The pirates fired their weapons blindly, but Sarah had already rolled behind a cargo container. Humans had another advantage that the database mentioned. They were extremely good at fighting in chaos and confusion. Because humans had spent thousands of years fighting each other, they had learned every dirty trick there was. Sarah came up on the other side of the smoke and her hands found a pirate's weapon. She yanked it away and used it to hit him in the throat. Not with the trigger end, she didn't want to shoot anyone unless she had to, but with the heavy stock. He gasped and fell. The remaining 2 pirates were backing away, coughing in the smoke. Sarah picked up one of their weapons and pointed it at them. "Drop your guns," she said. "Now!" They dropped them. Their eyes were wide with fear. They had heard about hazard level 9 species. Now they were seeing it in person. "On the ground," Sarah ordered. "Face down, hands behind your heads." They obeyed. Sarah used the cable she had taken from the tool room to tie them up. She worked fast, using knots her father had taught her when she was a child. Human children learned to tie knots for fun. Now those same knots were restraining armed pirates. Sarah dragged the unconscious pirates over and tied them up too. Then she took all their weapons and communication devices. She smashed the communication devices and kept the weapons. 4 down, 8 to go. She went back into the ventilation system and crawled to a different part of the ship. As she moved, she stopped at several points to make marks on the walls. She used a piece of charcoal from the tool room to draw tally marks. The next pirate who came down this corridor would see 4 marks on the wall. He would know that 4 of his friends were gone. He would start to worry. That was psychological warfare. Make the enemy scared. Make them imagine things worse than what was really happening. Humans were very, very good at that. Sarah's next stop was the engine room. 2 pirates were stationed there, looking nervous. The war drums were still playing on the intercom, and now they could hear other sounds too. Sounds of their fellow pirates calling out, trying to figure out where the human was. Sarah didn't attack these 2 directly. Instead, she sabotaged the door controls, so the door locked from the outside. The 2 pirates were now trapped in the engine room. They weren't hurt, but they couldn't help their friends either. 6 down, 6 to go. Sarah crawled through the vents toward the ballroom. She needed to free the passengers, but Cragzool and 5 other pirates were still there. Those were the most dangerous ones, and they would be on high alert now. She stopped at a ventilation grate that looked down into the hallway outside the ballroom. She could see 2 pirates standing guard at the door. They looked terrified, their weapons shaking as they pointed them at every shadow. Sarah pulled out one of the chemical containers she had prepared. She had mixed it carefully to create a specific reaction. A bright flash and a loud bang, but nothing that would actually hurt anyone. A distraction. She opened the grate slightly and dropped the container. It hit the floor and exploded in a burst of light and sound. The two guards screamed and fired their weapons at nothing. While they were panicking, Sarah dropped down behind them and hit them both with the stock of her weapon. They fell unconscious. 8 down, 4 to go. Sarah took their weapons and communication devices. Then she used the controls to open the ballroom door. Inside, Kragzul was holding a weapon to Pip's head. The little alien was crying, his purple fur wet with tears. Kragzul's face was furious and desperate. "I know you're out there, human," he shouted. "Come out now, or I kill the child." Sarah stepped into the doorway. She was covered in dust and sweat. She had a cut on her forehead where she had scraped it crawling through the vents. She had bruises on her arms from the fighting, but her eyes were calm and clear. "Let him go," Sarah said. "Drop your weapons first," Kragzul demanded. Sarah looked at Pip. The little alien was staring at her with huge, terrified eyes. She remembered him asking her if humans were dangerous. She remembered him wanting to be her friend when everyone else had laughed at her. "Humans will sacrifice themselves without hesitation for pack members," the database had said. Sarah dropped her weapons. "Now step inside," Kragzul ordered. Sarah stepped inside. The door closed behind her. The other 3 pirates moved to surround her, their weapons all pointed at her head. Captain Vorthak was standing with the other passengers. His face showed horror and confusion. "Lieutenant Chen, what have you done?" "What humans always do," Sarah said quietly. "Protected my pack." Kragzul laughed, but it sounded forced. "You gave up everything for one small alien? That was stupid." "Maybe," Sarah agreed. "But here's the thing about humans. We don't make decisions based on what's smart. We make decisions based on what's right." She looked at Kragzul calmly. "And I needed you all in one place." Kragzul's smile faded. "What do you mean?" Sarah pulled a small device from her pocket. It was a detonator she had built in the maintenance room using parts from the ship's systems. "I've rigged this room with explosive charges. They're small and precise. They won't hurt the ship's hull or the passengers, but they will hurt anyone standing in the blast zones." She pointed at the corners of the room where she had placed the charges while crawling through the vents earlier. The pirate's eyes went wide. "You're bluffing," Kragzul said. "Am I?" Sarah pressed a button on the detonator. Nothing exploded, but all the lights in the room suddenly went red. An alarm began beeping. "That was the safety timer. The charges go off in 60 seconds. You can kill me, but the detonator is on a dead man's switch. If I drop it, it triggers immediately." She looked at the other passengers. "Everyone get down and cover your heads, away from the corners." The passengers dove to the floor. Even Captain Vorthak obeyed without question. The pirates stood frozen, uncertain. 50 seconds, Sarah said calmly. Kragzul stared at Sarah, his weapon still pointed at her head. Sweat was running down his scarred face. "You're insane. You'll die too." 40 seconds, Sarah said. Her voice was steady. "Yes, I might die, but I'll make sure Pip and the others are safe first. That's what matters." "She's not bluffing, boss," one of the other pirates said. His voice was shaking. "Look at her eyes. She means it." Kragzul looked into Sarah's eyes. What he saw there made him take a step back. There was no fear, no doubt, just absolute determination. 30 seconds, Sarah said. "What do you want?" Kragzul shouted. "You want us to surrender? Fine, we surrender. Just turn off the bombs." "Drop your weapons first," Sarah said. "All of you. Kick them toward me." The pirates dropped their weapons and kicked them across the floor. Sarah didn't move to pick them up. She just kept holding the detonator, watching them. 20 seconds. Now let go of Pip." Cragzul released the little alien. Pip ran towards Sarah and buried his face in her leg, crying. Sarah kept one hand on the detonator and used her other hand to stroke Pip's head gently. "Good," Sarah said. "Now all four of you get on the ground, face down, hands behind your heads." They obeyed. The mighty pirates who had terrorized the entire ship were now lying on the floor like scared children. 10 seconds, Sarah said. Then she smiled. "Just kidding. There are no bombs." Everyone in the room froze. "What?" Cragzul's voice was barely a whisper. Sarah held up the detonator. "This is just a remote control for the ship's alarm system. I couldn't build real bombs in 20 minutes. That would take at least an hour, and I'd need better materials." She tossed the device aside. "But you believed I could do it. That's the thing about hazard level 9 species. We don't need to be the strongest or the smartest. We just need you to believe we're crazy enough to blow ourselves up to protect our pack." Captain Vorthak stood up slowly, staring at Sarah with new respect and maybe a little fear. "You bluffed. You risked your life on a bluff." "It wasn't really a risk," Sarah said. "I knew they would believe me, because the database told them humans are irrational when protecting others. They expected me to be willing to die, so I used that expectation against them." She looked down at the pirates on the floor. "That's another thing humans are good at. We understand psychology. We know how fear works. We've been using it against each other for thousands of years." The ship's security team finally arrived, led by Kralak's warriors who had recovered from the initial attack. They stared in shock at the scene. 4 pirates on the ground, 8 more captured throughout the ship, and 1 small human standing in the middle of it all with a crying alien child hugging her leg. "How did you—" Captain Vorthak couldn't finish the question. "Training, preparation, and stubbornness," Sarah said. She was starting to feel the exhaustion now. The adrenaline was wearing off, and every muscle in her body ached. "Also, you might want to check on the 2 pirates I locked in the engine room. They're not hurt, just trapped." The security team moved to secure the pirates. Cragzul was hauled to his feet. He looked at Sarah one last time. "You're a monster," he said quietly. "No," Sarah replied. "I'm a human. There's a difference. Monsters hurt people for no reason. Humans hurt people to protect other people. It's not pretty, but it's necessary sometimes." Pip's parents rushed forward and pulled their son away from Sarah. The father looked at her with tears in his eyes. "Thank you. Thank you for saving him." "You're welcome," Sarah said. Then she turned to Captain Vorthak. "Permission to return to my cabin, Captain? I need to clean up." "Permission granted," Vorthak said. "And Lieutenant Chen, I apologize for everything. We didn't understand what humans were." "Most people don't," Sarah said. "That's okay. We're used to it." She walked out of the ballroom. Her legs were shaking now, but she forced herself to walk steadily. She could rest when she was alone. 2 hours later, the ship's doctor had finished treating Sarah's injuries. She had cuts, bruises, and burns on her hands from the welding torch. None of it was serious, but the doctor kept shaking his head in amazement. "You should be in more pain," he said. "These burns are significant." "I've had worse," Sarah said truthfully. She had been injured much more seriously on Kepler 442b. This was nothing. There was a knock on her cabin door. When she opened it, she found Ambassador Zixlar standing there, except it wasn't Zixlar. It was a new Vexthari that looked almost identical. Crystal species could regenerate from fragments if the damage wasn't too severe. "Lieutenant Chen," the Vexthari said, "I am Zixlar's continuation. I carry his memories up until the moment of his shattering. I wanted to apologize for my previous self's words. We were wrong about humans." "Apology accepted," Sarah said. "I have accessed the full classified files on humanity," Zixlar continued. "Not just the hazard warning, but the complete history. I understand now why your species is classified the way it is. You survived extinction events that killed 95% of life on your planet. You survived plagues that should have wiped you out. You survived wars against yourselves that lasted for generations. And after all of that, instead of staying on your home world, you looked at the stars and decided to keep going. Sarah smiled. We're persistent. It's our best and worst quality. The Council has been notified of what happened here, Zixlar said. They want to speak with you when we reach Station Zenith 7. They're reconsidering humanity's position in galactic affairs. Because I beat up some pirates? No. Because you demonstrated why humans are dangerous. Not dangerous in the way of weapons or military might. Dangerous because you refuse to give up. Because you bond with anyone, even people who mock you. Because when you decide something is worth protecting, you'll do whatever it takes. Zixlar paused. There's a recording from the Galactic Council archives. I think you should hear it. He played an audio file from his communication device. An ancient voice spoke. The human species presents a unique challenge to galactic civilization. They are not the strongest, fastest, or most intelligent species. However, they possess a quality that makes them potentially more dangerous than any other known species. They do not acknowledge limitations. When other species encounter an impossible situation, they accept defeat. Humans see an impossible situation and ask, how can we make this possible? When other species lose hope, they surrender. Humans lose hope and keep fighting anyway. When other species are told something cannot be done, they believe it. Humans hear cannot be done and treat it as a challenge. This is why we classify humans as hazard level 9. Not because they will harm us, but because nothing will stop them. Not logic, not pain, not fear, not even death. If humanity decides we are friends, they will die for us. If humanity decides we are enemies, they will ensure we cannot threaten others again. If humanity decides something must be accomplished, they will accomplish it or die trying. The Council must decide, do we welcome this species as allies, or do we try to limit their influence? I recommend the former, because trying to limit humanity will only make them more determined. The recording ended. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Who recorded that? She asked. The Council chairman, 500 years ago. It was recorded when the Council first detected radio signals from Earth. They've been watching your species ever since, waiting to see if you would reach space. And if you did, what kind of species you would be. And what's the verdict? The Council has decided that humanity should be given full membership rights immediately. No probation period, no restrictions. Full voting rights and access to all galactic resources and knowledge. Sarah raised her eyebrows. Because I beat up some pirates? No, Zixlar said again. Because you proved what the database warned about. You proved that humans are exactly what we hoped and feared they would be. Unstoppable. The next day, the Celestial Traverse arrived at Station Zenith 7. The Galactic Council Summit was about to begin. Sarah put on her formal uniform and prepared to represent Earth. Before she left her cabin, she checked her messages. There was one from Earth Fleet Command. Lieutenant Chen, we've heard about the incident. Well done. Remember, you represent all of humanity now. Show them what we're capable of. Make them glad we're on their side. Signed, Admiral Peters. Sarah smiled. She would make Earth proud. Not by being the strongest or the smartest, but by being what humans had always been. Determined, adaptable, and absolutely unwilling to give up. She walked through the corridors of the ship toward the docking bay. Other passengers moved aside to let her pass. Some nodded respectfully. Others stared with something like awe. Captain Vorthak was waiting at the docking bay entrance. He saluted her formally, fist over heart. Lieutenant Chen, it has been an honor to have you aboard my ship. The honor was mine, Captain, Sarah said. I want you to know, Vorthak continued, I've submitted a full report to the Council. I've recommended that all security personnel receive training in human combat tactics. We have much to learn from your species. Just remember the most important lesson, Sarah said. Which is? Never underestimate someone just because they're small or weak-looking. Some of the most dangerous things in the universe come in small packages. Vorthak smiled, showing his fangs. Lesson learned. Sarah boarded the transport shuttle that would take her to the station. As the shuttle pulled away from the ship, she looked back at the celestial traverse. 2 days ago, she had boarded that ship as a joke, a charity case species that didn't belong. Now she was leaving as a representative of a hazard level 9 species, a species that the galaxy was learning to respect. At the Galactic Council Summit, Sarah sat in the human delegation's chair. It was near the front now, moved from the minor species section to the main floor. Around her sat the representatives of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. The council chairman, an ancient being made of pure energy, called the session to order. We have much to discuss today, the chairman said, but first I want to address the human delegation. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, please stand. Sarah stood. Every eye in the chamber turned to her. Lieutenant Chen, the chairman continued, your actions aboard the Celestial Traverse have reminded the Council of why we classified humanity as a hazard level 9 species. You have demonstrated courage, intelligence, and determination. You have also demonstrated humanity's greatest strength, the willingness to sacrifice yourself for others. The chairman paused. The Council has voted unanimously to grant Earth full membership rights effective immediately. Welcome, Lieutenant Chen. Welcome to the Galactic Council. The chamber erupted in applause. Sarah felt tears in her eyes, but she blinked them back. She stood straight and proud, representing all of humanity. Later, after the formal session ended, other representatives approached her. The Kralax wanted to discuss military training exchanges. The Vexithari wanted to share scientific knowledge. The Sithrall wanted to establish trade agreements. Everyone wanted to be friends with humanity now. Sarah accepted their offers politely, but she remembered the database warning, if humanity decides you are friends, they will die for you. These aliens didn't know it yet, but by accepting humanity into their council, they had gained something very dangerous, an ally who would never, ever abandon them. That night, Sarah sent a message back to Earth. We're in. Full membership. They know who we are now. They know what we can do. And they're glad we're on their side. Mission accomplished. The response came back quickly. Congratulations, Lieutenant. You've made Earth proud. Come home soon. Your species needs you. Sarah looked out at the stars and smiled. Humans had finally earned their place in the galaxy. Not by being the strongest or the smartest, but by being themselves, stubborn, determined, and absolutely unwilling to give up on the people they cared about. Hazard Level 9. The galaxy would learn what that really meant in the years to come, but for now, they had learned the most important lesson. Never mock the little human, because that little human might just save your life someday. And if they decide you're worth saving, nothing in the universe will stop them from protecting you.